I'm Dorothy Doyle, President of the League of Women Voters, St. Louis Park. I would like to welcome you to the Candidates Forum for Legislative Districts 46A and B. We thank the candidates and the audience for attending tonight and our online audience for viewing. The League of Women Voters does not support or oppose a political party or a candidate for office. The League has a long-standing history in our community of providing unbiased candidate and issue information that is widely used by Minnesota voters, regardless of their political beliefs. There is never enough time to cover all the issues. If you feel that your question was not addressed, please contact the candidate directly after the forum. And now I would like to introduce our moderator, Jackie Wells, a certified moderator from the Golden Valley League of Women Voters.
Good evening, everyone. We're glad to have such a large audience in person. We will start the candidate forum with the opening statements. Each candidate will be given up to 2 minutes for their opening statement and up to 2 minutes for their closing statement. Opening statements will be in alphabetical order, beginning with the candidates running for Legislative District 46A, Larry Kraft and John Nagel, and then the candidates for 46B, Kim Rich and Cheryl Joachim. The closing statements will be in random order, and the order of answering questions will be rotated. Please note our timekeepers, Deb and Elsine in the front row, who have a 30-second and a 15-second sign. Candidates, please finish your sentence quickly when you see the stop sign, or I'll have to interrupt you. We ask that there be no demonstrations of support or opposition to the candidates or their positions from our audience, so that candidates are allowed the full time to get their points across. The public has been encouraged to submit questions online in advance of this forum. For those in the audience here, if you have a question, please write it on a note card, raise your hand, and one of our volunteers will pick it up for you. We'll take audience questions during the first 30 minutes of this forum. So we'll begin with the opening statements, and the first candidate to respond is Larry Kraft.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Larry Kraft. I want to thank the League of Women Voters, and I want to thank my opponent, John Nagel, and honor his many years of service to our community and state. You're welcome. My wife, Lori, and I moved here 21 years ago when I was recruited to run sales and marketing for a tech company. We have 2 kids who were born in SLP. One is now in college, and the other is a senior at Park. Climate change and the impact it will have on our young people is why I'm involved in politics. 11 years ago, after 25 years in high tech, I changed careers. I ran a national nonprofit that helped high school students take local action on climate change. And in SLP, the students I mentored just hit it out of the park and initiated our climate action plan, which passed in 2018 and is the most aggressive city plan in the state. I then ran for and won a seat on city council to implement the plan these students initiated. When this seat opened up 2 years ago, I saw an opportunity to have a bigger impact on climate policy across Minnesota and represent our community's values in St. Paul. And I've loved this job. I love representing our wonderful community. I love being able to affect issues we care about. And, you know, Minnesota right now is having quite a moment. The work the legislature did in partnership with Governor Walz is being held up as an example for other states and for the federal government. Personally, over the last 2 years, I was a lead author on a wide-ranging set of 27 bills that became law, including several climate bills that are nation-leading and are being copied by other states. But there's more to do to continue Minnesota's leadership on climate and to make Minnesota the best place to live, work, and raise kids. And I look forward to talking about that vision tonight.
Thank you very much. John Nagel, please.
It's really good to see everybody tonight. It's nice to see a lot of very familiar, happy faces. Unlike Larry, I think we've got a lot of problems in Minnesota. We have got high taxes. We have got high crime. Our kids are failing. There's just a whole lot of problems that are going on. And I'm not a one-issue person. I've been retired for 13 years from the State Patrol as a lieutenant. And during those 13 years, I volunteered. I was also a criminal justice chair at a college. I've taught college classes. I volunteered for the Department of Natural Resources. I was a firearms youth instructor, so kids could go off to hunting with their parents, and we taught, stewards of the land and wilderness skills and how to handle firearms safely. And I've been teaching defensive driving classes. So some of you, I may look familiar to you because I've been teaching defensive driving classes in the metro area for forever. So I've got a lot of things in my background, and I really want to make sure that Minnesota is actually a safe place. I've lived here all my life, bought my grandpa's house, raised my kids here. And when I've talked to people lately, it's devastating where we're going in the state because we're not going in a good direction.
Thank you. Kim Rich, please.
Thank you. My name is Kim Rich. I'm a retired entrepreneur and business owner. I've held real estate and insurance licenses here in the state of Minnesota. I've called myself an independent voter all my life, although looking back, I'm really a Republican who split his ticket once in a while. Ironically, during a tour of the Georgia State Capitol, while staring at a portrait of one of my big three regrets, Jimmy Carter, I was on a call with a Minnesota Republican asking that I step up and run for state house because my opponent was running unopposed again. My platform, number one, public safety. We want to make sure that the police and fire departments have all the resources they need to do their jobs. Number two, education. We want to make sure that the budgeted money for education is actually making its way into the classroom. And number three, accountability for all the taxing and spending. Representation is listening. I listened when a police department in our district explained they were down 6 officers, and they're losing good officers to cities who pay more. When a mother of a 9th grader who has 47 students in her class, and 3 doors down from her was a teacher that was just laid off, and a grandmother of another 9th grader who has assignments written on the board prior to class, and they never see a teacher in that class. Most people I speak with on the other side of the aisle agree. Public safety and or education are the most important issues. I believe the third, accountability, is the remedy for both of those. I remind everyone that voting is the minimum we do in this country. It's a country of we the people, and we elect our representatives to and hold them accountable when they fail. Thank you.
Thank you. Cheryl Joachim.
Hello, my name is Cheryl Joachim, and I want to thank you all, the St. Louis Park League of Women Voters, and you all here watching tonight or at home. I've had the honor of representing Hopkins and St. Louis Park over the years in the Minnesota House and was really excited to gain a part of Edina 2 years ago with redistricting. Some of you may have seen me subbing in your classrooms during the interim as a paraprofessional or a teacher in Hopkins, Edina, and St. Louis Park. Hopkins is where my husband and I bought a house about 27 years ago and raised our 3 kids. It's feeling a little empty now that they're all launched and into their careers. And being your representative is one of the most fulfilling jobs I've had after motherhood. Many of you have already heard my origin story, how I got into politics advocating for early childhood and family education, because it saved my children from me, and then serving on the Hopkins Human Rights Commission and then the Hopkins City Council, and then finally being elected to the Minnesota House. I got involved in politics because I was passionate about an issue. I ran for city council to better connect people to the government that's supposed to serve them. And I ran for the House to bring that experience to the state level for our communities. I'm socially liberal and approach fiscal issues with a thoughtful and a practical eye. I think that's from my time on city council. And I know how to work across the aisle to get things done. Despite our polarized climate, I believe that we share so much in common. And I've heard that from many of you through your emails, phone calls, your attendance at community conversations that I host, and the town halls that we do together. I want to thank folks who have shared their concerns, their hopes and dreams for their families and their businesses and their community. I look forward to our conversation tonight and to earning your vote on November 5th. Thank you.
Thank you. And you'll be first to answer our audience questions. So we took questions from the audience here and online, and we'll be asking as many as we can of these candidates, and they will have up to 1.5 minutes to respond. So our first audience question is, what legislative measures, if any, would you undertake to address the lack of affordable housing?
That's a good question. I was expecting the 2-minute one you gave to us ahead of time, but I think maybe that was last night's debate. We had 2 in a row. So affordable housing, that is an issue that needs a lot of collaboration from the city, county, and state level. And I say that because putting together affordable housing can be really tough for our developers. And depending if you want to do deeply affordable or 50% AMI. And I've taken a class at the ULI Institute to learn from developers how they produce prospectus together to figure out how we can, at the state level, help them fill those gaps. But it takes the county too, with some of their money put in, and the city as well. And I say this because when I was leaving City Council in Hopkins, we started a project with PPL at Cottageville Park. And it took 4 years after I left for them finally to get their financing together, because it can be that difficult. So in the last few years at the Minnesota House, we've put $1 million into affordable housing through bonding. We've done things through our tax bill to make it easier for developers to build. And it's an ongoing thing because it's not just about affordable housing, it's workforce housing. It's housing for our teachers that are just starting out, for our nurses, for our police officers, our firefighters, so people can live where they choose in a community that they care about.
Thank you. The next person is Kim Rich. Oh, and sorry to interrupt. Would everybody just make sure you bring the microphones a little closer? I think we're having some troubles with the audience hearing you online.
Can
Thank
you hear
you.
me okay? Thank you. 40 years ago, while I was taking real estate licensing training courses, some of the students in the classes were not really interested in getting a real estate license. They were only interested in learning about real estate and housing. Looking back, I'm sure those people were better off for the knowledge they received. Back then, the cost of these courses was much less than it is today. I think they're around $1,000 to $1,200, which would make taking a class like that quite a commitment. But I think the topic is extremely important to young people who wonder how they will ever obtain a home. A person's home is often the most valuable asset they own, and opportunities present themselves in real estate often. I would support offering classes that teach skills like this to students so they're better prepared to recognize when opportunities arise.
Thank you. Next is Larry Kraft.
Thanks. Yeah, so this is a huge issue that I learned a lot about while on City Council. So a few things I want to point out. We did make a terrific investment in 2023 by putting a 1/4-cent sales tax in the metro area to be dedicated to affordable housing, because these are not one-time needs. So we will have an affordable funding stream going forward to focus on affordable housing. We need to work on supporting first-generation home buyers. We have a great program in St. Louis Park that we've been duplicating at the state level. These are folks that have never purchased a home before, or their parents haven't, because affordable housing, you also want to be able to have folks to be able to build wealth. We have a huge wealth gap in this country on the racial side, so being able to support first-generation home buyers. I'd also say that we need to be careful and watch what's happening with folks from out of state buying up homes and then turning them into rental properties. So, this looking at regulating folks that are hedge funds coming in from out of state. And the last thing I will say is we need to build a lot more housing. We have a 100,000 plus unit shortage in housing. And so we need to make it easier and work with cities so they make it easier for us to build all kinds of housing in all different places. And we need to make sure we build it in the right places so that we don't increase our sprawl problem and our greenhouse gas transportation problem.
Thank you. John Nagel.
I just have to ask Larry, So the sales tax is actually being also paid by the same people that want the affordable housing. They have to pay that same sales tax?
May I answer?
Is that okay? Or can I just go on?
Yes, please
Okay,
do go
sorry.
on. Thank
All
you.
right. First off, I don't think we should be passing more and more laws. I always hear legislators say how many laws they've passed. I think we'd all be happy if we had fewer laws to deal with. When it comes to housing, affordable housing is going to start with our educational system. If our kids aren't learning, if we aren't getting the money to the good teachers and the principals in the classrooms, these kids aren't going to get good jobs. And if they don't get good jobs, they're not going to be able to afford good houses. One of the first things that I would do for the builders, there would be no sales tax on any building materials whatsoever. That would be one of the first things that I would do. So if you take a look at building in Minnesota, we have put so many mandates and so many strangleholds on small businesses that's why everyone's leaving. That's why there's such a shortage. So that's what I would do and not do.
Thank you. And you are first for our next question. And that is, what are some specific examples of how you have reached across the aisle or worked with people from a differing political viewpoint?
Well, since I've never run in a political forum before, I have had to do things. I was the bicycle coordinator for the Department of Public Safety, so I taught bike and pedestrian safety. I was a consultant for the federal government. And do I have any people in here that ride bikes? Okay. So there are your people that ride bikes that like to be out on a path, where you're away from cars. And then there are the people that want to run on the freeway. Okay. And when you get a whole group of bicyclists together, it is really, really hard. It's a little bit like trying to herd cats because they all want to go in a different direction. But we actually made great strides. I taught classes for bike and pedestrian safety all over the nation. And we were able to bring in a whole lot of different people and show them how to build, communities that were safe for walking and biking. And we taught, American Disability Act. You know what it's like to go into Boise, Idaho with a bunch of guys wearing cowboy hats and you're in a suit and they look at you and say, what can you possibly teach us? Well, after 3 days, they learned a lot.
Thank you. Next person is Larry Kraft.
Yeah, I think working across the aisle is really important. And it starts with building relationships and getting to know folks. And that needs to be centered around listening, and listening with the intent to understand and willingness to change and incorporate feedback. So I have, in my couple of years, worked across the aisle. There was a regenerative agricultural bill that I did last session with a legislator from southern Minnesota, a Republican, and talking about how do we encourage regenerative agricultural practices that can benefit farmers and benefit water and benefit climate and benefit the nutrition of the food that's grown in those. I'm just working right now with two Republican legislators about investigating where transmission line goes and renewable energy and how that can translate into economic development in greater Minnesota. Now, here's an example. You hear a lot at the Capitol about how there's a lot of partisanship. But behind the scenes, there's a lot of really good work. There's great people on both sides of the aisle. Here's an example. I had a small bill last session on climate action planning to help cities encourage do planning. It was unlikely a Republican was going to vote for it. But one of them on our committee said at one point, have you thought about making sure that a portion of this stays in greater Minnesota? And I said, that's a great idea. Why don't you send me some language? He did, and I incorporated it in the bill, and it made it better. He didn't vote for it, but it's that kind of thing of listening and improving what we're doing that I think is really, really key.
Thank you. Cheryl Joachim.
Thank you. So hopefully you can hear me. So I've reached across the aisle a lot, especially my first 4 years when I came in the minority. But coming from city council where it's nonpartisan, it was easy to do to meet city council members across the state that I'd be serving with, and we had something in common to talk about. And I have worked on bills over the years. Probably my favorite bill that has been bipartisan is the Hometown Heroes Act. I was a House member on the Democrat side carrying the bill, and a senator on the Republican side was carrying it. And that's a bill that we did for an organization called MinFire to help provide cardiac training, PTSD supports, and then a critical care insurance policy that the state is helping pay for to give $20,000 to each of our firefighters if they get cancer or a cardiac issue that they are more than likely to get doing their job for us. So that is one of my favorite bipartisan bills. I have to say one of the other ones was working on expanding the historic tax credit so that we could make sure we're rehabbing buildings, not just tearing them down, and then working on mental health access for some of our students. And I have to say I agree with Larry. I did my master's in public administration, and my capstone was what makes an effective legislator in a divided government, and interviewed over 16 of my colleagues. 15 out of the 16 said the number one thing is building those relationships and listening. So when I became a chair, I made sure that I was meeting with Minority Lead every week and that we were working together to figure out what was going to go into the bill.
Thank you. Kim Rich, please.
Thank you. Listening, finding common ground, consideration, reason, and transparency, these are all important in every aspect of everyone's life. It was demonstrated this year how little was actually heard by the majority in the House and Senate in our legislature this year. The Republican minority made every effort to be heard, but it really fell on deaf ears. Constituents are paying the price for this lack of consideration. Bonding bills failed and other bills passed without the minority being allowed to even read hundreds of pages of these proposals. It is quite the opposite of transparent bipartisanship that Minnesotans should expect and they deserve. Thank you.
Thank you. And you will be up for the first response on our next question. And that is, what legislative initiatives, if any, would you support to strengthen and modernize the power grid and/or renewable energy initiatives?
I'll need you to repeat that,
Sure,
please.
not a problem. What legislative initiatives, if any, would you support to strengthen and modernize the power grid and/or renewable energy initiatives?
Well, there's stacks and stacks of the used and deteriorating windmill blades, and they're not, I don't know if there's any way to recycle them. There are a lot of these things that we talk about with renewable energy. They have a pollution factor involved in them, and I'm not sure what regulations would be met for this. For clean energy, when I was a sophomore in high school, during the first Earth Day, every major newspaper and network published experts who gave the Earth 10 to 15 years to live. Some may have extended it, but when it was nothing but doom and gloom for humans everywhere. We watched weeks of film strips, and my mom even noticed that I was depressed and asked me, what's going on? And I said, well, with the chance of being drafted to go to Vietnam and the world coming to an end in 10 years, what do I have to be happy about? And we talked about it a lot. We came to the conclusion that humans make a mess sometimes. And we're really good at cleaning those messes up. I think those windmill blades have a future somewhere, but, you know, we need to address that. That would be what I would do.
Thank you. Cheryl Joachim, please.
Thank you. So there's a few things that we've already done this year at session that I think are really important to talk about. One of them is shortening the length of permitting time to build transition lines so that it's easier for that to happen. The permitting time was getting really long. Now we've got it down between 9 to 18 months. One of the things that St. Louis Park brought to me a few years ago was allowing our small businesses and our businesses in residential units of 4 or more to be able to apply to the city for money for renewable energy things in their businesses, whether it be the type of lights they're using, solar panels, heat pumps, and that they could have that assessed to their property tax without a huge cost to them, and then pay it out over time, but have the immediate item on their building, because sometimes the return on investment takes a small business a little bit to get to that point so that they could actually afford it. But it can make a huge difference to their bottom line moving forward. We also leveraged federal dollars this year that was coming from the ILJA, and I always forget not to use acronyms, but it's the federal money we got from work towards that climate energy and to construct things. We were able to leverage that to help out Minnesotans.
Thank you. John Nagel, please.
Again, I don't know if we actually need a legislative initiative for the power grid itself. The energy companies are really great when you let them go to come up with new technology. If I were part of the legislature, I would actually have a true energy plan. We don't have one. We are looking at energy sources that we're finding out have half-lives. The wind turbines, the company that was going to recycle them in Minnesota, they were going to grind them up and use them with concrete. Now, that company went out of business. The problem is when we start using legislative initiatives to start picking winners and losers when it comes to energy, it's very expensive to the taxpayer, and it's very dangerous. My idea is that we get the Pollution Control Agency, we get our engineering schools, we get our energy producers, and we actually come up with a true plan. We have a blackout, and I believe that's a bill that you voted for. We have a blackout bill coming in 2040. We're not going to be able to meet the energy needs safely that we're all going to have.
Thank you. Larry Kraft.
Yeah, so we do have an energy plan. The bill that you're talking about was 2040, 100% carbon-free electricity by 2040. The utilities supported it, and it did not pick winners and losers. It was not a fuel-specific bill. It is to encourage innovation and let the utilities pick the technologies that are necessary. In terms of other things that I would do, right, legislative initiatives, so around the grid, we have for years been in a very centralized model where you generate electricity in one central location and you send it out. And what's happening now is that we're needing to, kind of like the internet, right, where you went from mainframes to computers, we're having more and more renewable energy at the edges. And so we need to really encourage that transition, and we will all be better off for it. We will have more cost-effective electricity and more reliable electricity, and especially in the face of the increased weather problems we're seeing from climate change. Another key area I would focus on and will continue to focus on is buildings, because buildings generate 40% of our greenhouse gas emissions in Minnesota. And by making them more energy efficient, we simultaneously save people money and make the buildings more comfortable and more healthy to live in. So virtually, and I'd say other areas, industrial decarbonization, regenerative agriculture, where the solution that climate change lead you to a better solution for farmers and for the food that's grown in that land.
Thank you. And you may be seeing a pattern, but you are up first for our next question. What do you see as Minnesota's biggest public safety problems, and what would you suggest to deal with those problems?
Yeah, so I will say public safety is a fundamental issue that government must provide. It is absolutely critical. I will say the approach that I favor, and actually I take a lot of my lessons from St. Louis Park, right? The police department here made a decision 20 years ago to focus on community-centered policing before it was a thing, right? And building relationships, looking like the community that they're trying to protect. And so, I think that we need to encourage that kind of culture in police departments, and that the kind of accountability that the St. Louis Park PD has. The other thing is that on top of adequate funding, right, the other thing for public safety is we have to address root cause issues, right? We have to address the proliferation of guns in our society. We need to do gun violence prevention, poverty, affordable housing, food, adequacy of food. So you put all these things together. You want to address root cause of crime and those issues, you got to get at those things. The other thing I will say that we can't allow is the past couple of couple of years, we have seen an increase in the assaults on police officers. And that is something that we need to stand up for, and especially as we see police officers, the police departments getting into the right frame of mind on community policing, that's something we need to address.
Thank you. John Nagel?
Well, being a retired state trooper and being a police officer for 30 years and actually working in St. Louis Park, my first ride-along was with the St. Louis Park Police Department as a very, very young man. And the St. Louis Park guys were actually my heroes. My grandpa was a firefighter for Golden Valley for a long time. You know, it's interesting, the defund the police movement came along, and you've decimated the police departments in Minnesota. Do you know that we're going to be short almost 3,000 police officers in the next 2 years? And it's because they are afraid to go out and do their jobs because of all of the anti-defund the police movement. We need to make crime a crime again. We need to arrest people. We need to have prosecutors that actually put people in jail. And we need non-activist judges that are going to put people in jail and keep them there. Are we forgetting that we had the carjacking at the Byerly's over here in St. Louis Park? Are we forgetting about the carjacking in Minnetonka? So we need to rebuild our police departments, but we as a community need to start making crime a crime again.
Thank you. Cheryl Joachim?
Thank you. I have done ride-alongs with our police departments in St. Louis Park, Hopkins, and Edina, and I can assure you crime is still a crime. And there's two people up here at this table that have voted for funding police. Representative Larry Kraft and I, both as city council people, and the last 2 years on public safety bills and tax bills. I think education and public safety kind of go hand in hand, and I say that because one of the biggest problems we're having in both is recruitment, retention, and respect. And that is something that needs to be focused on. And when we put money into the tax bill this year is $300 million going straight to the police departments to figure out what they wanted to use for it. I believe Edina got $2.3 million, St. Louis Park got $2.1, and Hopkins got $828,000. When I talked to our Chief Johnson in Hopkins, he was also telling me a program, and we do this a lot. We do pilot programs and see how they work, and then if they work well, and the folks that we're working with and our police department say, hey, we want to do this again, we figure out how to fund that. One of those programs is a way to provide, Hopkins got money to provide two officer spots for people to work within the department before they, doing other items and duties while they were going to school, getting paid for that, and then making that a quicker entry point for people that are maybe switching careers or thinking about moving into police force. We've seen that work in education as well with the Grow Your Own programs, but I always have that phrase echoed in my head: recruitment, retention, respect.
Thank you. Kim Rich?
Minnesotans agree with the importance of my number one platform, public safety. We need to get the police the resources that they need to do their jobs. My opponent disagrees with that, and I don't know why. The rhetoric coming from the left inspires violence against citizens and police. And the rhetoric comes straight from many high-ranking politicians and media on the left. We've seen the police get deliberately ambushed and killed, as well as assassination attempts on justices, legislators, and several attempts on presidential candidates. We saw this happen during the riots in Minneapolis with the governor. We're seeing it today with our county attorney. They want to reduce sentences on serious crimes. Punishment is a proven deterrent. Zero to little punishment is not a deterrent. Police can chase, but they won't because they fear prosecution. Charles Manson was convicted of first-degree murder, but he never committed a murder. He inspired others to do it. I support the consideration of this case when officers are ambushed and killed. The media and politicians who support defunding the police or spread hate-filled lies about others should be held accountable when they inspire to commit violence.
Thank you. And you'll be first for our next question. If elected to the legislature, what committees would you want to be on and why?
That's to me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Well, I think I would be good on a small business committee if there is one. Ethics, the education finance committee would be fun. I think we can find ways to remedy some of the issues on my list here, the education piece especially. I think there's a lot of room for improvement there. Our children are failing in being able to read up to standard, and math and science as well. And there's really no cause for this. The statistics that I'm citing have been going down since before the pandemic. So the people that are there right now have this on their record, and they should be held accountable for it, which means that we, the people, elect our representatives. And when we do that, if we're not satisfied, then we can make a choice to replace them. And if you're satisfied, you would vote the way for Cheryl, or if you're not satisfied, you could send a message and vote for me.
Thank you. Next is Cheryl Joachim.
Thank you. We had this question last night too, and we do have a business committee, jobs committee. Actually, we have 3 of them. It's pretty awesome. I have served on different committees over the years as I came in the minority, and I have been in the city council. I was lucky enough to serve on property taxes and local government. I've served on our transportation and policy committee, on the rules committee. I did a small stint on higher ed, education policy, education, finance. My most consistent committee was usually around property taxes and taxes. This year I'm the education finance chair. I sit on education policy, I sit on the tax committee, and I sit on ways and means. So I had a real opportunity to really dig in and see some of the bills as they came through the legislature, came through ways and means before they hit the floor, because committees, that's where the really big work gets done. A lot of folks spend a lot of time putting their bills together, and committees are where we vet those and where more eyes can be on them, and we have testimony from the public, and hopefully you've worked with the people that will be impacted beforehand. But you always, there's something you might forget that might need to change, as Representative Kraft had said when he got an idea from a member across the aisle. That's so important, and that's why it's important to have that committee process. I kind of think of myself as a utility player, but I'm really enjoying being on the education bill since 20 years ago. That's where I started in advocacy work.
Thank you. Larry Kraft.
Thanks. Yeah. So right now I'm the vice chair of the Climate and Energy Committee, and I'd like to stay on that one, given the focus that I have. Transportation, I also serve on and would like to continue. It's, besides it being the #1 source of greenhouse gas emissions in Minnesota, also about 400 people a year die on our roads, and I think there's some stuff we can do about that. And it's a tremendous source of air pollution as well. So, and how we get around in the state is critical. I've served on commerce, and that's been really interesting, given my background that I have 25 years in the business world. That was a pretty good fit for me. We'll see if I get that next term. Housing is something I'm very interested in. It's so foundational to folks' success, and where we, as I mentioned before, how we evolve and where we build this stuff is so important. And then lastly, and this is maybe kind of a wild card, is agriculture. I have no background in farming, but I really do believe, and I see opportunities to work across the aisle on this, that there's a great way to engage our farmers more in the fight against climate, as well as the fight for clean water in a positive way.
Thank you. John Nagel.
Well, being the new guy, you kind of have to take what they give you. But, the dream would be, I've been a teacher for over 30 years. Obviously, public safety in law enforcement, and then again, transportation, because I've worked with, the Department of Transportation for many years, and I was one of the first ones that had to break roundabouts to people. People just love roundabouts, especially when you're trying to teach them how to use it. I see you shaking your head. No, you don't like a roundabout. Yeah, I know. Here's one of the reasons why I'd like to be with the public safety. I'm not sure, but I think I'm the only one up here that's been given the Minnesota Police and Peace Officers Association endorsement. No one else has that, and I'm not even on the legislature. There was a young trooper by the name of Ryan Londrigan. I believe you've seen what happened to him. He was unjustly accused, and a Hennepin County attorney wouldn't let it go. I don't remember seeing anybody down there that is currently sitting with me except for Kim and I. So when it comes to law enforcement, I think you really know who the people are. But those are the three that I'd like to be on if I make it to the legislature.
Thank you. And you will get our next question first, and that is, as a member of the legislature, what measures, if any, would you support to reinforce or ensure voter confidence in our elections?
Well, right now, Minnesota is one of those really lucky states where I know here in St. Louis Park, I ran a caucus. That's one of the reasons why I'm running, is because someone asked me to run a caucus about a year ago. We're really lucky in Minnesota, and we're really lucky in St. Louis Park because we have really marvelous volunteers. They work very, very hard. The people that I've talked to that are part of it, whether they're judging or they're challengers, I don't know of one instance where we've had any kind of a problem, here in St. Louis Park. I think with our Secretary of State and the fact that we have driver's licenses going to illegal aliens, there is now an issue and a problem with, are you automatically registered? Now, there's a lot of arguments, a lot of shaking of heads, but I know that legislators right now are looking at that, and that bothers them. So if there's anything that bothers a voter, okay, that needs to be addressed. It needs to be cleaned up right away, because we don't want anyone to think that our voting system in America is not a good one.
Thank you. Larry Kraft.
Yeah, thanks. I think we have free and fair elections in Minnesota and in the country. If you dispassionately look at the data, that is just what it shows you. So I think the thing that I would say is something that Mitt Romney said, and would ask my colleagues sometimes on the other side of the aisle that are fomenting distrust in our election system to just tell the truth. Now, I will also say that I think some of the things we've done in Minnesota about elections and expanding access, right, by doing things like 16 and 17-year-old voter pre-registration, which I carried, right, because we want to get young people to think about themselves as voters as soon as possible. I think automatic voter registration is a great thing as well, and we have the protections in place to make sure that that is done right. So I think Restore the Vote was a fantastic thing as well, where we said folks that have served their time can vote again while they're on probation. One of the best ways to integrate folks back into our economy and into our society.
Thank you. Kim Rich.
I understand a lack of confidence. Many are surprised to learn that someone was willing to step up to run for 46B. Yet up to 30% of Minnesota's registered voters didn't vote in recent elections. So that confidence really isn't there. They may be concerned there's no proof of citizenship required. We're taking people's word for it when they sign on a piece of paper, but it used to be a thing of honor to sign your name and say you are who you are. But I don't know if people trust that anymore. So we can certainly tighten up elections in this state. I think it's important. I think people want that. And we'll really only know for sure is if we get a really great turnout this year.
Thank you. Cheryl Joachim.
Thank you. We do have a wonderful voting system here. Everything always could have improvements, though, and we did some of that this year by expanding ballot access to people that deserve the right to have ballot access, and ones that are citizens, ones that have shown that they've served their time. Restoration of voting actually is in just as many Republican states as is in Democrat ones, so it really doesn't cut down a party line. And I like our system that still has paper ballots as backup plans. And we also have a Secretary of State who works very, very hard to make sure that our cities who run the elections in our counties have what they need to get that job done. We have updated the voting systems and helped provide money for that for our cities and counties so that they can actually get the vote count right with those machines. And they're always certified ahead of time and ahead of the election. We are the second in the nation for voter turnout. We got bumped out from last year from #1. And I think that is because we do have confidence in our system, because it's our friends and neighbors who are helping run those elections. And one item, too, that I want to make sure you all know about is that we passed a law this year to make sure those friends and neighbors are safe when they are doing their civic duty and being our election judges. That it was very, very important to a lot of us.
Thank you. And you are first for the next question. Do you or do you not support legislation that changes current statute in regards to safe storage of firearms to try to prevent children from accessing unsecured firearms?
Yes, I do. We almost passed it out of the House this year. It had a lot of work done by Representative Jamie Becker-Finn, who actually worked with the NRA and looking at that. We did pass the red flag law, universal background checks, binary triggers, which is something that was used to kill our Bloomington police officers, Burnsville police officers. And then also we increased the straw purchasing penalty, because that's what's getting a lot of those illegal guns on the streets. I sat down recently with a constituent who is a licensed firearms dealer, and we had a great conversation over coffee, him explaining how sometimes definitions we put in law kind of don't make sense, or we need to be talking more to the dealers so that we can get it right, and I think we've been doing that over the years. He also brought up something really important that I'm going to start working on this year. He mentioned it's great to have a straw purchasers law, but the firearms dealers don't necessarily have the training or maybe the trust or the relationship with the police department to have that quite work. So I'm going to be talking to him about what that may look like. And I think it's very important to make sure that those that have guns are not going to harm themselves or others. That's why we passed the red flag law. We still have some work to do around domestic violence and guns, though.
Thank you. Kim Rich, please.
Well, the Second Amendment is one sentence, and there's been a lot of effort for decades, millenniums, to try to restrict that right. And guns are dangerous. There's no question about that. They shouldn't be in the hands of individuals that have no experience understanding how they can be dangerous to themselves or other people. So the guns don't commit crimes. The criminals commit crimes, and we can go on and on about prosecuting criminals, but every time there's a shooting, it's all about the gun. And so if it wasn't guns, it would be another weapon. And I really don't think that it's a wise decision to force a homeowner to hide their gun from literally everyone, plus have it stored in a fashion that would be inaccessible if they needed to have it. And we have a right to protect ourselves if someone comes into our home. And we have a responsibility to protect children from a weapon as well. I don't think that the current proposals are going to address that. I think we need to rethink that so that everybody can be safe.
Thank you. John Nagel, please.
Jackie, can you say the question one more time?
I sure
please?
can. Do you or do you not support legislation that changes current statute in regards to safe storage of firearms to try to prevent children from accessing unsecured firearms?
Well, obviously, as a DNR instructor, firearm safety is paramount. That's what we teach our kids. You know, the proper way of storage, the proper way of carrying it, the proper way of transporting it in a car. The problem that I have with that is, yes, I want firearms stored appropriately, but I'd like to throw this out to, you folks. If you have a restraining order against someone who really wants to hurt you, and the fact that our police officers are far and few between, I would not want you to not be able to get to a firearm if you so had one and were trained in it to protect yourself. So I think when you look at this law, you need to look at who's in the building, what are the circumstances. It's just not a yes or no kind of a thing, all right? I mean, we far too often see women being killed by men, and the police aren't going to get there in time. So yes, I want properly stored firearms, but I think that law needs to be looked at and worked out very, very well to protect everyone.
Thank you. Larry Kraft?
Yeah, absolutely. I support this. This law was worked out very well on every issue that was just mentioned here. The comment, the thing that really concerns me about the not passing safe storage, the whole thing about criminals commit crimes. This is to protect kids that get a hold of guns and then do something with them that they later regret. The thing for me is that one of our neighbors went and testified before our committees about this bill. For when he was 14, they went to a party in Wisconsin. There were guns around, not properly secured, and his older brother killed himself. That should not happen. It should not happen. This bill was based on recommendations from the NRA. So it would say that if the gun was within your control, meaning on your bedstand or nearby when you're asleep, that was fine, right? But it said when it's not in your control, you need to store it safely, separate from the ammunition. This is what the NRA recommends. We need to have some accountability here. This is a measure that in states that have done it, suicides and deaths among kids have gone down, and guns are the leading cause of kids and teenagers in this country. This is common sense. We need to pass this next year.
I would contest
Thank
that's
you.
the leading
Thank
cause
you.
of death.
Excuse me. Thank you. Larry Kraft, you are up first for our next question, and that is, would you or would you not support legislation to ensure end-of-life options? And please explain your position.
Yes, I would. I did. I was a co-author on that bill. And it really comes down to a respect for personal decisions. When someone is at their end of life, and the bill was very carefully worded based on experiences in other states, have to get two different opinions on it. But when you're facing a terminally ill, and have months ahead of you or some time ahead of you of just pain and poor quality of life, at that point, why shouldn't someone be able to have the freedom, and why can't we respect them to work with their medical assistants, their family, to have the freedom to end their life on their terms?
Thank you. John Nagel.
No, and this is why. I watched my mom take care of my grandmother, and my grandmother did suffer. But sometimes quality of life, taking care of someone, brings out the best in other people. I always fear that when we have a law like this, perhaps, even though you have two different people saying that they want to do it, it can always be abused. I have a very good friend, and he and I talk about end-of-life options, and I feel that if that's something that he wants to do, fine. But unless I have a large number of constituents that come to me and want that, I would vote if the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. But I don't think right now end-of-life option is a good one, only because, again, I have seen what people do for their loved ones at a time of great need.
Thank you. Cheryl Joachim, please.
Thank you. Short answer is yes, I do support the Compassionate Care Act, and it's gone through different iterations over the years. As Representative Kraft said, the one that we have before us is very tightly written. You have to have a terminal illness that's going to kill you in a year. You have to have 2 sign-offs by medical professionals, and it has to be your choice. And that's the most important thing. It took me a while to get there. It took some really compassionate people at Park Shores in St. Louis Park and buildings in Hopkins, and now I've heard about it when I've been knocking on doors in Edina. But what it really took was having my sister-in-law's mother talk about what happened to her husband at the end of his life. And this is a staunch conservative. And she had to watch her husband brutally die from a terminal illness, where by the time he died, his hands and feet were black, and he was in extreme pain. and this would have been his choice. And I just feel bad that we couldn't get it across the finish line before she died of her 7-year battle with cancer. It had already metastasized, and I think it would have been her choice if it would have been left up to her. But we just have to make sure that we are giving people that choice and that the bill is solid so that won't be abused. And I firmly believe that this one is a good bill. I almost wish we could expand it a little bit, but I think this is a great start.
Thank you. Kim Rich.
No, I don't believe that it's a good idea to do this. It's not as compassionate as you make it sound. You know, if someone's suffering, nobody wants to watch people suffer. And that's across the board. I don't think any of us in this room or anywhere in this cities, in our district, would want people to suffer. But there is you start doing these things, you're opening the door to abuse and to things that are outside of what you intend. And I guess I don't have an answer for that, but it is, we're all going to die, and, committing suicide legally I don't think that's the answer. So, thank you.
Thank you. The first person to respond for our next question is John Nagel. And that question is, childcare is very important to many in our labor market. What, if anything, should the legislature do regarding access and availability to quality and affordable childcare for working families in Minnesota?
Well, childcare, two different things. It's small business, and then it's young kids trying to make sure they've got a safe place for their children. Right now, our legislature has put down all of these mandates that it's actually driving childcare out of business. And until we remove those mandates, you're not going to have the choice. People are going to have to, especially in greater Minnesota, people are going to have to go further and further to find some sort of daycare. So if we had a better business climate where we had lower taxes, where there'd be more people wanting to go into that, and I just talked to someone 2 or 3 days ago, and they have a childcare business. And they were telling me about all of the mandates that have been imposed upon them by the trifecta, and there's really no need for it other than to say we passed another law and we did something. And I just think that's wrong, and it's going to hurt our young families.
Thank you. Kim Rich, please.
I agree with John. Government is regulating everything to the point where small businesses are going out of business, they're leaving the state, and this, by everyone here thinking this is an important thing, such an important thing to offer people in our state, you would think that there would be many opportunities for a child care to open, and it's actually being restricted into, there's no way that these people can do that service without being able to, they're just not able to do it. Anyway, I believe that the goal for some of these mandates is to put these people out of business. And they want the unions to create these nonprofit centers and public schools, and they can unionize the workers and control the outcomes. And then the cost of child care is just going to skyrocket, and it won't be placed on the parents of a child, but it will be placed, the burden will be placed on taxpayers all across the state, whether they have children or not.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheryl Joachim.
Thank you. I just want to say COVID taught us a lot. One of the things that taught us is it's really hard to work when you have your kids at home with you. But childcare was struggling, especially in greater Minnesota before COVID hit. That's why we started down the path of providing small business loans to folks that want to build out childcare. We've seen some cities step up and help with building costs. We have expanded the child tax credit And that actually, what we did last year is going to lift about a third of families out of poverty and help them with those basic necessities like childcare. We also gave grants to childcare businesses to help pay their employees a little bit better, because that's one of the real problems they're having and why they're going out of business is they can't find people to work for them because they can't pay them what they need to get them to work. So there's a lot of yes ands in there. We have to support the small business. We have to give them money to help them with employee retention. And then also we need to expand our child care tax credit that we have so that folks can afford to pay for it. Because trust me, you don't want to be trying to work, even if it's remotely, with a 2-year-old on your lap.
Thank you. Larry Kraft, please.
Yeah, I agree a lot with everything Rep. Joachim said. I'll add a point that this is an area where it makes tremendous sense for investment from the state. Studies have shown that for every dollar invested in child care, early learning, it generates a $16 return over the life of that young person. You know, they do better, they get housed better, they perform better in education. So this is an area that we should be spending a lot of attention to, and we did, as Representative Joachim said. You know, there certainly needs to be a balance, but part of the thing about childcare is also making sure that it's safe for our kids. And there are too many stories around the country of childcare that isn't. So I prefer to think of what we do there is making sure there's accountability in our childcare system. We need to invest here substantially and make sure there's accountability.
Thank you. First up for our next question is Kim Rich. And I'm just going to ask a broad, open-ended question, which is, what, if anything, do you suggest the legislature do in regards to K through 12 education? And that's Kim Rich first, please.
Well, there seems to be a huge disconnect between the legislature and K through 12 education. As I said, I've talked to grandmothers where there's no teacher in the classroom for their 9th grader, and teachers are being laid off. The budgeted money is not finding its way into the classroom, and the teachers or the students are the people that suffer that. So there's got to be some way to find out where the record-setting budget of the last legislative session went. Where's it going? There's a lot of bureaucrats and nonprofits, I believe, that are profiting off of the budget, and kids are forced to, do their own self-study when a teacher can't show up for class. So when I'm elected, I will dig in to try to find out where all this money is going and make sure that there's a teacher for every class, that there's not 47 students in a class, and that we're not laying off good teachers. This is just, it's on their watch, and it shouldn't be. So, thank you.
Thank you. Cheryl Joachim.
Thank you. What we did last year, I'm glad, was on our watch. I was not joking when I said 20 years ago I started doing advocacy around early childhood education, but also K through 12 funding. And we got to do last year with the budget surplus stuff we were talking about for 20 years. We got to cut the cross-subsidy for special education in half, double what we're spending on EL students, make sure that our school districts' budgets are stable by providing a 2% increase automatically every year with a 3% cap so they can get up to inflation. Because you know what? Even though we spent $2.2 billion on schools last year, and a lot of that money was ongoing, which is very important. You don't want to spend a lot of one-time money in the classroom. We still only filled about a third of the hole, because in the last 20 years, 4 of those years, districts got a 0% increase. And we all know about compounding interest. I know my husband, who's a math teacher, does, and it's really hard to dig out of that hole. And we're just starting to turn that around. We invested in the READ Act. Teachers, school districts across the state are excited about that. And it's going to take some time, but there's districts that have already started it. Monroe Elementary up in Brooklyn Park. They started training their teachers 3 years ago. They started doing the READ Act 2 years ago. In 2 years, they saw proficiency ratings go from 45% to 90%. And if you want to talk about accountability, I'm running out of time, but I led the charge in the Office of Inspector General and the Minnesota Department of Education to make sure that your taxpaying dollars are used wisely in our classrooms.
Thank you. Larry Kraft?
Yeah, I love going after Representative Joachim on this as the chair of the Education Finance Committee. To provide even a little bit broader global context, if you look at the past 20 years of disinvestment in education that we've done in Minnesota, if our investment had just kept pace with inflation, we were down over $1,000 per pupil, right? So what do you expect? You don't get efficiencies in the classroom. What do you expect when you disinvest in education? Now, we have a lot to do, and there's more work to be done, but we've made the right strides, and the READ Act stuff is phenomenal. I'll also say that there was some information that came out recently about test scores and truancy. And test scores are a metric that we need to look at, but they're not the only thing. And the READ Act has not yet had any influence on test scores. But the good news is that the truancy is going down, that more kids are attending school, and you need them there before you improve performance. So that's great. And lastly, I just want to tell a story about St. Louis Park schools, because there is some phenomenal stuff happening in our schools. I got to be principal for a day at Peter Hobart Elementary School, and I went into a 4th grade classroom, and they were doing a project about what it would look like to reconnect the Rondo community with the land bridge, and they were deciding where should we place the school? Where should we place the library? What can we do to best integrate this community? That stuff is happening in 4th grade in our schools. That is so cool.
Thank you. John Nagel?
I went to school in St. Louis Park, and it was Cedar Manor. And back then, we celebrated Jewish holidays. We celebrated Christmas. We had Christmas trees, and it was a melting pot. I went to more bar mitzvahs and bas mitzvahs, and I had a great time. And we all grew up in St. Louis Park respecting each other. And somehow or another, we lost that. But, okay, under Governor Walz, he's running around telling everybody that they fully funded our schools, okay? Well, when they fully funded our schools, they turned around and they gave so many unfunded mandates that the fully funded money, it's like you gave them $1 million, but now they have $1 million in unfunded mandates, and now the schools are right back to nowhere. They didn't put any money into the buildings. When you have $18 billion that you blow in a couple of months and then another $10 billion in taxes, why wasn't this money invested into our schools? We need to take a look at where our money is going and how it's being spent. And we're not spending our money the way we should be spending it in our schools. It's not getting to our kids. Why do we have more administrators than teachers in Minnesota?
Thank you. You'll be up for our next question, which is our last question before the closing statements. And that question is, what are your thoughts about ranked choice voting for state offices?
I'm against it.
Okay. Larry Kraft?
Absolutely for it. I think I'm maybe the only person here that ran in a ranked choice vote election.
Was that when you were?
Excuse me.
Excuse me.
Sorry.
When I ran for city council here in 2019. And it was fantastic. And let me explain why I'm so supportive of it. It's because of the incentives it creates within the electoral process. It's the incentives to listen to each other, even to folks on the other side of the aisle, even to folks that disagree with you, and it's a moderating influence. It also removes some powers from the political parties. So here's a great thing. So there was 2 people I was running against, and even if someone had a lawn sign for one of my opponents, I still had to go knock that door because it was important to me that they would pick me as their second choice because I might need that. And actually, in our race, I won on the second ballot. So the other thing that it does is you don't want to get so negative on folks. You don't want to piss off your opponent's supporters because then they may not vote for you on the second as second choice and so lose that. So I think if you look at the incentives that ranked choice voting creates, it will address a lot of things that are problems in our political system.
Thank you. Kim Rich?
No way. It is not the right thing to do. It's Larry may have won that election, but I think he was picking up votes from the third place person that was eliminated out of that election. So he wasn't the second choice for the majority of the people where he got that, where he was elected. So there's a lot of, I think that there could be some algorithms that could figure out how to defeat a ranked choice voting election. If someone wants to put their mind to it, there's kids out there right now, they should be listening to me and try and do this, to be able to figure out how to win that and defeat it no matter what. And so I'm against it. Thank you.
Thank you. Cheryl Joachim.
Thank you for the question. I was hoping there'd be a few more tonight around education and reproductive choice, but you can all talk to me about that afterwards. No, I have always been for the cities being able to decide if they're going to do ranked choice voting, and now we have the machines that actually can make that happen, and the way you can program the tabulators. And I think we landed in a good place last year when we figured out, let's let the cities do it. They're studying it. There are great incubators to figure out how this is going to work. And then look at that data and then look at how we could do this statewide.
Thank you. So thank you to all the candidates for responding to the voters' questions. And now the candidates are allowed up to 2 minutes for their closing statements. And we will begin with Cheryl Joachim.
Thank you. I just want to say it's really been an honor to be the representative for Hopkins, St. Louis Park, and Edina in the legislature. I take the job very seriously. And I hope to earn your vote on November 5th so that we can continue the good work that we've all started together. Hearing from folks at community conversations and town halls I host during session, the emails, the phone calls, knocking on doors across our district, I really do find common ground. Folks want an economy that works for everyone, quality education for our youngest learners to those preparing for college and careers, accessible, affordable childcare, money in long-term care in our healthcare system, to protect women's reproductive choices, investments and reform in community public safety to feel protected and supported, sensible gun control, a dependable transportation system, and to protect our environment as well as our rights. I will always stand for your right to love who you love, worship how you choose, and to equal justice under the law, no matter where you live or what you look like or who you are. I am socially liberal and fiscally practical. I've had experience at the local and state level and have worked across the aisle to get things done. And as always, I look forward to our conversations with you as I work hard to earn your support. You can always contact me. All my information's on the little flyer out there. And I want to thank the League of Women Voters for hosting this forum again. It's really important for folks to have exposure to the candidates they're voting on. And you're one of the few places that still does this since we're losing so many of our local newspapers. But thank you, and you guys have a great night.
Thank you. Kim Rich, please.
If any of you paid attention to the end of the last legislative session, you witnessed Minnesotans not playing nice. The Democrat trifecta was underhanded. It was gaveling through piles of bills verbally without a roll call. Democrats concealed 1,400 pages of bills and language and passed as many as possible before the clock ran out, meaning all the Democrats decided in advance to pass everything without allowing the consideration of anyone, including you, their own constituents. This is not representation. People don't send representatives to the House to tell them what to think. I expected more from my representative than just to rubber stamp an agenda which turned into a record-setting fraud and waste. On another occasion, when I split my ticket, one of my big three regrets, the governor of Minnesota, he made a tremendous effort to shut down a vibrant and prosperous economy. That economy created a great surplus. My opponent and the Democrats followed in lockstep to campaign on returning that surplus to all taxpayers, but that didn't happen. The surplus became leverage for Democrats to spend at will on their agenda to secure their voting base. Accountability was my third agenda. It should take its natural course here and inspire those who can see and understand this and vote to eliminate the current trifecta. I would appreciate your vote this year.
Thank you. John Nagel, please.
I'm not doing this because I want to. I'm doing this because I love my kids and I love your kids. Everything that the Democratic Party has done the last couple of years with their trifecta, you know, Larry talks about power of political party. Man, they've had it. Everything that you touch is more expensive. They have raised taxes on everything. And in a year and a half, you're going to be looking at them going, wow, we have this huge budget deficit. Now, they're either going to have to cut all of these programs or they're going to have to raise your taxes again. And I don't know about you, but there's a lot of people leaving the state because of that. Our Jewish neighbors are especially unsafe right now. Have you ever been to a synagogue? Have you ever walked in? They have armed guards at the door. Why in America and in St. Louis Park do we have armed guards standing at a synagogue? That's where we should be looking. We should be going and finding out, why do these people have to live in fear? Now, Don Samuels had a whole bunch of signs that were in St. Louis Park neighborhoods. Those signs were stolen, and then they were thrown on a synagogue front doorstep to send a message. Now, Mr. Kraft, you belong to the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party is supporting Ilhan Omar, which is despicable, frankly. And I am here to tell you that when we went down for the Senate meeting, I didn't see one Democrat down there when we were talking about how these kids were not taken care of at the University of Minnesota. I'll tell you, everybody in here, I will stand with the people of Israel. I'm a St. Louis Park kid. I have Jewish friends, and I am not going to run away from that. So if you want to support Elon, you go for it, but I'm not going to do that.
Thank you. Larry Kraft, please.
Yeah, so I share the concern of anti-Semitism, and I work a lot with our Jewish community on it. And I'm not involved publicly in the Omar race at all. Look, I get involved in a lot of issues.
Sorry, continue, please.
I get involved in a lot of issues at the legislature, often in response to constituent ideas and concerns, or because of things happening in our community. I'm taking a look at state DWI policies right now in light of the recent tragedy at Park Tavern. And what you will continue to see from me is leadership on climate policy. Because if we don't get it right, climate change makes virtually every other policy area worse. And yet it is also a tremendous opportunity. The solutions that climate change leads us to are really a roadmap to a better way of living. Plus, clean energy is probably the biggest economic and jobs opportunity of the 21st century, and Minnesota is poised to lead in this area. One of the questions I get asked the most is, often on climate change, but sometimes generally, is does what we do here in St. Louis Park matter? The answer is yes. How we vote here, who we put into office, what we do in St. Louis Park is huge. We have led on affordable housing, recycling, composting, racial equity, climate action plans, net zero building at Westwood Nature Center, and so much more. While we're not perfect, I think we're special because we have a great mix of caring for each other, listening to each other, respecting differences, not hesitating to tackle hard problems, and just wanting to do things that work. I've loved representing those values in this community in the legislature, and I ask for your vote on or before November 5th.
Thank you. And thank you to our audience here at City Hall for listening so courteously to our candidates. And now would be an excellent time for you to applaud these candidates for participating in the forum. Excuse me. Thank you. I've got the microphone. I would like to remind everyone again that the views expressed in this forum are those of the candidates, not those of the League of Women Voters. Sponsorship of this forum is not an endorsement of any candidate by LWV St. Louis Park. And League President, oh, there you are. League President Dorothy will close us out.
The League of Women Voters of St. Louis Park would like to thank you all for coming and our online audience for viewing. I would like to quickly mention that our neighbors in Golden Valley are sponsoring a judicial candidate forum tomorrow evening at 7 p.m. at the Golden Valley City Hall. And that's really important because those are some statewide judicial offices. Thank you to city staff for getting the room ready for us. I want to thank again our moderator, Jackie. Thank you to our St. Louis Park League members. A shout out to all of you who helped out tonight and to all who support the League. A special thank you to Laura Cleveland, our voter service chair, who volunteered so much of her precious time to make this event happen. And let's give all of those people a round of applause. And again, we would especially like to thank our candidates for being part of the democratic process by running for office and for being willing to serve our community. So one more round of applause for them. Finally, the League researches issues important to our members and to the health of our communities. If you are interested in finding out more about what we do and how you can also make a difference, please pick up a membership brochure at the registration table or visit us at lwvslp.org. Membership is open to anyone 16 years of age and older. You can find more information about candidates and about voting at vote411.org. There's a QR code in the back, or mnvotes.org. Links to all the candidate forums and additional voter information can be found on the LWV St. Louis Park website and Facebook page and lwvmn.org. In-person early voting begins this Friday, September 20th, and mail-in absentee ballots may be requested by mail or online. Election Day is Tuesday, November 5th. Again, thank you for coming, and remember to vote on or before November 5th.